In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening. There's a war being waged in America that does not make the nightly news, does not trend on social media, and does not get debated on the floors of Congress with the urgency it deserves. It is a war over something so fundamental, so elemental to the promise of this republic that its neglect is nothing short of a national moral failure. That war is over who gets to be literate, who gets to read, who gets to access the written word, and through it, the power to name themselves, calm, claim their history, and write their own future. Because no mistake in American literacy has never been neutral. From the moment it was made illegal to teach an enslaved Black person to read, the written word has been a site of struggle, of resistance, of liberation, and of deliberate systematic denial. James Baldwin once told us, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Tonight we face something. We face the reality that Black children, immigrant children, and refugee children in cities and school districts across this country are being failed by a system that was never fully designed with them in mind. And Fred Hampton, that brilliant 21-year-old revolutionary who organized rainbow coalitions and fed children breakfast before the government took his life, Fred Hampton has understood something that our school boards are still learning, that you cannot build a movement, you cannot build a community, you cannot build a free people on empty stomachs and empty minds. Literacy is not a school metric, it is a survival skill, it is a revolutionary act. And so tonight, on America in Black and White, we bring you a man who understands all of this, not abstractly, not theoretically, but in the marrow of his practice, in the classrooms he has taught, in the organizations he has built, in the school district he now helps to lead. He holds a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's an adjunct professor at two of the University of Wisconsin system's flagship institutions. He is a voice on the national stage, from the Wisconsin Association of School Boards to the National School Boards Association at Harvard University itself. He is a co-founder of a literacy initiative that is changing lives one reader at a time, and he is a son, a student, a leader shaped by a grandmother's love, by Baldwin's fire, and by Hampton's fearless commitment to the people. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King, and tonight we are honored, we are privileged, and we are ready to go deep. Please welcome the Assistant Superintendent of Instruction for the Oshkosh Area School District, co-founder of Read More Oshkosh, educator, scholar, and community leader, Dr. Samuel Coleman.
Wow, Mr. King, that was a powerful introduction. Thank you for laying the groundwork and certainly for the opportunity to be here tonight. It's an honor.
Well, I thank you, and I'm glad that you're here because education is one of the things that we like to focus on the most because we really like to make sure that when it comes to education and teaching our kids for the future, it means more than we could ever imagine.
That's right.
So I want to first start. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Those of you that are here with us every single day, we appreciate you. We love you, and we thank you for your support.
Yes.
Dr. Coleman, I want to get into the first part that we always do here on the show.
Okay.
And that is, I like to get to where I like for the audience to get to know a little bit more about you. So we're going to talk about the journey, the origins, and the calling. And
Okay.
so before we talk about the school districts and national stages, take us all the way back. Where did you grow up, and what was the world that formed you?
Yeah, wow. So all the way back, I got to go to 17th Street in Milwaukee, North Side. So I am very much a product of my environment, and I say that with so much pride. The city of Milwaukee, and particularly the neighborhood that I grew up in, the people who were a part of my village and to this day are part of my village, very much shaped the man that I am today. And so I give so much credit to my community, but most importantly also to my grandparents and my parents, who instilled in me a fight that can never be quenched. My grandmother, who's from Kosciuszko, Mississippi, moved to the north and found her home in Milwaukee, and she came to the north from Mississippi with this grand vision of having a life that was better for her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren than the life that she had in the South. And she sacrificed everything she had for that to be possible. Instilled those values in my mother, and then my mother instilled those values in me. And both my mother and my grandmother instilled this idea in me that education would be the key to my freedom, to my liberation, but also my platform to be a liberator and a freedom fighter for so many other young Black folks in the city of Milwaukee and beyond.
Wow. You know, it's leaders like yourself that we always need, is because I think as we think about going into the future, you know, the generations of kids today, you know, they really need a really solid but strong foundation that's teaching them the real things about education, not something that's dumbed down, that's got a whole bunch of nothing, that's telling them nothing that's going to add to their future. And I think for the work that you're doing, you know, it's something that I think people are going to get a chance to learn a lot about tonight, but I really appreciate you for the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll say what my parents and grandparents often told me what education was not what I experienced. They told me, and we'll talk about this throughout our segment tonight, education is this tool for freedom. And I didn't always feel that when I was in school. And I'll talk about just when education felt like it was liberating and when it felt like it was oppressive. The process for me as a scholar and becoming an educator, just going through the university systems, certainly there were times where I didn't feel like those were environments where I was free to be a thinker and a scholar and a voice for my community and my experiences in the ways that the academy would have appreciated. So I'll get into that. But I think what motivates me so much is the idea of education that was planted in my mind was one that I could never stray from. And when I was in educational environments and didn't experience that, alarms were going off saying something is wrong. Something is wrong here, because this is not what my grandmother and my mother said schooling is supposed to be. So we got to do something about this. And that do something about this is what I've been doing for the last almost 20 years. And it's been an honor of my life to serve in this capacity.
So you've earned degrees from multiple institutions, and you're currently completing work at Harvard.
Yes, sir.
But I want to know about the moment before any of that. When did you first feel called to education, not as a career, but as a vocation?
As a vocation. So I would say there was a powerful educator, Black woman, mentor of mine. Her name is Trina Gandy. I have to shout her out. She sought me out to serve as a dean at a high school in the city of Milwaukee. And at that time, I was teaching social studies, and it was a job, and it was a job that I was passionate about, but I didn't see it as a vocation in the way that you described it. I didn't see that work as a social studies teacher as the practice for freedom or the practice for liberation. Under Trina Gandy's mentorship and leadership and the vision she had for the school she led as the principal there, she recruited me to serve as her right hand, as the dean. And it was from that moment that I had a role model who lived this work as an educator, lived this work as a leader, who was willing to push against every narrative or any status quo framework that would suggest anything less than excellence for the students who walk through those doors or for the educators who serve them. So it was at that point when I realized, like, this isn't something that I just show up and do from 7:30 to 4:30 or 7:30 to 3:30. This is, she used to use this word, this is my life's work. So when I think about a vocation, I think about that being, you commit your life to this work. And it was at that point, as a dean in my mid-20s, and I'll be honest, at that time I had so much to learn, and I still do. I still have so much to learn. But it was at that point when living this work as an educator became real for me. And shout out to Trina Gandy for modeling for me and so many other educators what that means.
You cited your grandmother as one of the most influential figures in your life.
Oh, yes.
What did she teach you, not about school, but about people, that you still carry into your every room that you lead?
Yeah. So my grandmother, Miss Mary Lashley, first of all, taught me to love people, and love, not meaning that we always treat people. Sometimes love means you correct people. Sometimes love means you rebuke people. Sometimes love means you serve people. And my grandmother would rebuke me, rebuke me and other folks, the neighbors' kids. You know, my grandmother loved everybody. And she was the type of person who expanded the definition of love. And she would say, I'm telling you this, or I'm doing this because I love you. And if I didn't love you, and if I didn't care about you, I would let you continue in your error. So my grandmother taught me, first of all, how to love. But she also taught me that people won't always receive that love in a way that maybe I saw people receive it from her. People will fight against it, sabotage against it, undermine, all of those things, but you love them anyway. And so through that, I would say my grandmother planted that seed of love. Also, to be suspicious of people. My grandmother broke so many barriers as a Black woman in the city of Milwaukee, working in healthcare, and then from there going on to purchase a home in a Milwaukee suburb at a time where many Black folks weren't able to buy homes in the city of Wauwatosa, which is a Milwaukee suburb. And she was very suspicious of folks who would come around and say, I'm proud of you. I want to be a part of your journey. I want to help you. Welcome to the neighborhood. And so she also taught me to determine who people are by the fruit that they bear. So don't just listen to the words that they say. Don't just listen to or pay attention to the things that they do. Pay attention to how they treat people, even if they think nobody's watching. And that's something that I've taken with me throughout my years, both as an educator, but just a son of the city of Milwaukee, is that suspicion, the I would say powerful suspicion, not suspicion in a way where I want to keep people at a distance, but I pay attention to what people say, to what people do, to how people treat other people. And I also hope people do the same thing for me, that they're paying attention to not just what I'm saying or what I'm doing, but how I'm treating folks, how I'm living my life.
So, were there moments in your own educational journey where you felt the system was not designed for you? And if so, how did those moments shape what kind of educator you decided to become?
Yeah, there were many moments. So the thing is, when I was a student, how I wrote, how I carried myself on the page was not how I presented myself outwardly. I was the kind of person who people would see me and say, like, oh, there goes trouble. And I probably should have sent you a couple of pictures when I was a teenager for you to feature this. But how I appeared to people was very much it was not the identity of a scholar. People would have probably classified me like as trouble. And so when I would write, when I would submit projects, I was always accused of cheating or plagiarizing or having my older sister, who's much smarter than me, having her write my work for me. And that wasn't the case, but it to me, it began to show me that blackness and brilliance, if it didn't look a certain way, it was always going to be suspected as less intelligent or treated as less intelligent, if not packaged in a certain way. And that stuck with me throughout my entire life. And I got to a point in college where I would dress up to go to school, and like literally would wear a button-up Oxford. Sometimes I wear a tie, sometimes I wouldn't, but I felt like I had to do that. Even to this day, when I go to work, the very rare occasions that I'm not in a shirt and tie, people do a double take, like, "Oh, I didn't even recognize that was you." But it was I had to take on this image. I felt like, and I'm recovering from this, but from those early ages, always being second guessed because my intelligence on paper didn't look like what people were seeing in this black body that I live in and exist in. And so that was something that I think as I moved throughout my educational journey, both in middle school and high school, and certainly in college spaces, I've learned how to look the part, so that in people's minds, there wasn't this huge gap between my intelligence up here and then the image of intelligence that many people carry in their mind of how you have to look, how you have to talk. You know, sometimes I'm from 17th Street, so sometimes that comes out when I'm talking, and I have to remind myself, okay, like box it in this way so that people don't treat me as or assume that I'm less intelligent.
So let me ask you this, as you've gone throughout your life and you're here at this point now, and thinking about those very things, did that make an impact to just change you, or did that have an impact to give you an understanding as to how to be in the system and just be better?
Both. And I'm now coming to this point where I'm not trying to conform to the system. But yeah, at that time, I felt like, if I'm going to navigate this space, I got to play the game. And as Black folks, we are so guilty sometimes of saying, like, you got to know how to play the game. And so maybe this is not what you truly believe, or maybe this is not how you want to show up or present yourself, but you got to play the game. And so for so long, I've played the game and I've mastered it. And at this stage of my career and my journey, I'm not interested in playing the game. And so I would say the answer to that question is both. But I'm also at this point now where who I am and how I present my thinking, how I present my ideas, how I lead is very much rooted in the things that I care about. And it's not always going to be packaged in the ways that people want. When they see, Sam Coleman, PhD on paper, yes, there's going to be a certain set of expectations for what that means when I show up to do a keynote or when I show up to do my job. And I'm always going to carry myself as a professional, but in so many educational perspectives, being professional is shaped by through a white lens of here's what that means for white middle-aged men, perhaps for what professionalism looks like. But I might have a different perspective. And I'll say, for example, case in point, when I got to my current school district, I was told many times, like, you don't have to dress up and wear a suit here, actually. And because that was the standard of professionalism, throw on a polo, throw on a team shirt. But at that point, I'm like, but this is who I am. Like, this is how I present my excellence. And so, but it raised the bars. And so then I started looking around and seeing other folks showing up with suits and ties every day, or, on a Tuesday or Thursday. And it's like, oh, okay, like it's changing the atmosphere and the climate around here. So I became, as I worked to conform and present myself in a way that would be respected, certainly some of that grew on me. But I also make it clear that my identity is not rested in what I wear and my title and what I drive. My identity is rested in what I believe in and what I fight for, and this vocation that I've committed myself to.
Wow. That right there, that's setting the standard. That's impactful, because that means that you were what you wanted to see, and you started to see who you were in those other people.
Yep.
So, did you ever have to have talks with these individuals, or was it just one of those things that once they understood that this was you, they just started to do this?
We definitely had talks, and so I'm the only Black administrator on the executive team in my school district, and we have conversations about identity. And I certainly feel accepted, and I feel like a sense of rightful presence where I serve. But I do get asked sometimes, why do you show up in this way? Why, or you seem so uptight, like just loosen up a little bit. But it's that suspicion though that my grandmother planted. Sometimes it's like I gotta be like I gotta watch my back. But also just I'm presenting myself in this way because this is who I am. So we have those conversations, but I'm fortunate to serve with the team and work alongside people who are curious. And they ask some of these same questions that you're asking me. For the first time when I got to the Oshkosh area school district, my colleagues and community members asked me some of these same questions. Tell me about your journey. Because they hadn't, I'm new to this system, and not just me as a person, but what I represent, what I stand for, the angle that I lead from. And so people are certainly curious, and I appreciate being able to respond to some of those questions with both action and in conversation around here's what I stand for, here's what I care about, here's why I lead in this way. And maybe it comes across as strong, or maybe it comes across as uncompromising or unyielding, but it's because I believe this work is so important. And I don't think education is just about depositing information into kids' heads, and then if they say it back to you, then they've demonstrated some competence. I believe that if we reduce education to that, it dishonors what my grandmother told me education is. This is supposed to be a practice of freedom. This is supposed to be liberating. But people didn't hear that. People weren't talking about that education in that context here in Oshkosh before I got here, with education as a tool for liberation. And so I appreciate being able to engage in those kind of discussions and hopefully raise the bar and raise the standard beyond how people dress, but also I want them to think about this work in that same way.
So, literacy is at the center of your life's work.
Yes.
When did you first understand personally, visually, that literacy was not just a skill, but a form of power?
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it at this time, but when I looked back at when I was a elementary student, I've always loved reading, but I was one of three Black students in my class in my elementary school through fourth grade, and it was for some reason assumed that I couldn't read, and I always loved reading. So during my recess times, instead of being able to go out and play with my friends, instead of being able to um, do the things that everybody else was doing in recess, playing basketball, right? And I had to go to this reading van, and I didn't mind because again, I loved reading. So, but
Right.
I noticed like, why is this woman coming to get me out of the class, out of the fun classes, to go practice how to read as if I don't know how to how to read. I know this stuff. But eventually I was like, fine. I mean, I like it. So I mean, I like reading, but I noticed the opportunities I was missing out on because there was an assumption that I couldn't read. And some of those opportunities, being able to learn how to play an instrument or go into art class or being able to just exert energy by running around. When you don't have the ability to read, though, and that happens even today, when we think about when the literacy intervention blocks occur, students who need this additional support, it comes at the expense of another passion or another outlet or another interest that they might want to pursue in many cases. And so I didn't know it at that time, but as I've gotten older and I've realized how much opportunity people don't get access to, not because they're getting literacy help, but because they don't have the literacy skills to be able to access those opportunities. So I personally, when I think about all the doors that have been opened for me, it's because of my command of the English language, my ability to write contracts, read contracts, write MOUs, um, interview well and present my ideas, do conduct research and present that research. I've had so much opportunity, and all the doors that have been open to me, I believe it's a direct reflection of my ability and my strengths in the areas of literacy. And people who are just as intelligent as I am, or more intelligent as I am, but don't have the strong command of the read, the spoken, the written English language, they have a very different life trajectory and a sense of confidence, or even a sense of belonging. You know, I've so many people, like, I don't experience imposter syndrome when I go in places. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be here. Right? It's y'all pleasure that I'm here. So, you know, but there are so many people who move through the world with a sense of insecurity, and it's often connected to I don't want to try to say something and it comes out the wrong way because I'm not framing it right, or my literacy skills from a reading perspective or writing perspective aren't strong enough, so I don't belong in those spaces or in those rooms. And so many brilliant leaders who I've mentored and who I've worked with over the years, who absolutely belong in leadership spaces, they opt out themselves because they are concerned that they'll be mistreated, or that they just don't belong in those spaces, simply because the reading skills that they had a right to didn't get developed when they were coming up.
So how has your sense of calling evolved over the course of your career? And what does it mean to you now to be an educator compared to what it meant when you first walked into a classroom?
Yeah, so when I first started my work as an educator, I saw myself as a mentor, as a father figure, as a big brother. And I was the type of teacher that I never had classroom management issues. So when I would hear people talk about how bad students were, or these students needed to be kicked out, or they need, or they can't come to my class, I said, well, send them to my class. I'd love to have them in my. I just never had those issues because I had a way of connecting with students. They gravitated toward me. The way I taught social studies and U.S. history, and so that was fun for me. And for students who, prior to my classes, hated history, I would always say, "Oh, you're gonna love this class. You're gonna love learning," because I made it interactive. I made it relevant to their lives. But I saw myself as a role model, big brother. I didn't see myself as somebody who was using or leveraging education as free, because when you're a big brother, father figure, role model, the folks who are under that leadership will always come to depend on or revere that leadership as above them. I've since switched my thinking, and I say this often when I talk to young folks, and if I'm in a room, I always say the most important people in any room are the youngest people in that room. It's not the folks with all the titles and the accolades, the leaders, the big brothers, the OGs, actually the most important people in that room are the youngest people there, because they're going to inherit and either continue or destroy what we're working to build as the leaders and the OGs. So if we don't provide a space where they are able to fall deeply in love with who they are and appreciate who they are and respect who they are and become what their fullest potential would allow them to be, if we don't do that with intentionality, and if I don't do that as an educator with intentionality, I've set a situation up where everything I'm working to build could either be undermined, ignored, or disregarded. When I think about all the things folks like Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and all these leaders I can just name off, what they wanted for Black folks, if we don't know that and we don't buy into it, I bet they would be rolling in their graves right now when they look at the state of Black America. And not that they would be, because this is not what they wanted for us. But I don't believe that young folks came up under a liberation practice where they could take hold of what the dream was and the vision was and make it their own in a way that furthered their own self-determination and independence. So for me, I switched it up. I don't want folks to be dependent on me. I want folks to be committed to self-determination. And I've even reframed what self-determination means. Self-determination, I used to talk about, that this means that you are determined, you are gung-ho, like I'm going to accomplish something and nothing is going to stop me. And that might be true. But I've also expanded the definition of self-determination to mean you get to determine right now who you will become. So it's not about just being unstoppable. It's about being the architect of who you will be. You get to decide, you get to determine who you'll be. And if you don't determine that for yourself, this world will. James Baldwin wrote about that in his book, Fire Next Time, when he advised his 14-year-old nephew. And he said in this book, and I'll quote it, "You were born into a world that's spelled out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that you are a worthless human being. You are not expected to aspire to greatness. You are expected to make peace with mediocrity." He was telling his nephew, this world is going to determine who you are if you don't determine it for yourself. And I'll tell you, they have determined at best you'll be mediocre. So for me, it's been about empowering and creating the conditions where young folks determine for themselves who they would be if they were to reach their fullest potential. And then they stop at nothing to achieve it. So I have to step back as like the unc or the big bro or the father figure, because people would call me, "Hey, you got $20?" Or, "Hey, can you help me do this?" Or, "Can I get it right?" Nope. I do got $20, but I'm not giving it to you. And here's what you need to be able to do to put yourself in a, and not that I won't help people. I'm generous and I love helping people, but I don't want them to become dependent on me. I don't want them to become dependent on any system or any structure. I want them to participate in community where they are contributing their ideas, their insights, their strengths, their excellence into whatever village or community that they find themselves existing in. And when they plant those seeds, if they have a need, they'll be able to draw from where they planted that. But I don't want folks to just exist and consume and suck up resources around them, and they don't have anything contribute to the world around them. And I think we're raising a generation right now where so many young folks are entitled. Just give me the newest phone, the newest video game system, the newest shoes, the newest outfits, and I don't have to do anything for it. Like I'm just supposed to get it. And that's and that's not liberation. Liberation is, if you want that, let's make sure that you are in a position where you can have that and you go get it the right way. So that would be my shift, where I shifted from, being the person who wanted to be the answer, wanted to be the leader, wanted to be revered as the way maker for young people, to really saying my role is to walk alongside you and to make sure that you become everything that you were supposed to be, and even better than me.
Two things here. First thing is Wednesday night, the show that I did was The State of Black America.
Mm-hmm.
And as you explained that, it's hard for a lot of people to hear that.
Yep.
But I so appreciate you for framing that the way you did, because I honestly hope that still, despite the way it's put out, that people understand exactly what it is that you're saying, because it was so true.
Yeah.
The second thing is, when you and I spoke, and I told you about the educators that I've had on the show, the Black male educators, and I don't want to just keep harping on this, but it's just the truth. For whatever reason it is, and if you can just tell us, how is it that you guys are able to pull out and be so successful, impactful in your classrooms, where you have other instructors, teachers, whatever you want to call them, are always making this construment of a problem child?
I have to think and attribute that to the women in my life, and particularly the Black women in my life, because they saw something in me that they didn't see. They didn't see the problem child. They saw potential, and would often remind me, because I had a journey of time in my life where I fed into that narrative, where I was seen as the problem. So I said, okay, if you want a problem, I got you. Like I could solve your problem. And I did slip into that that self-fulfilling prophecy type of narrative. But I had women in my life. One, a former teacher of mine, Miss Sarah Looker, Tabia Jones, Denise Pitchford. I had folks in my life say, "You're better than this. This is not who you are." And so that voice, but also just my grandmother's voice and reminder to me just really planted a seed in me for who I'm supposed to be. So I can't attribute it to pulling myself up by my bootstraps or having the wherewithal or the foresight on my own. God sent some powerful women in my life along the way to remind me of the greatness that I have in me and to correct me, as I talked about earlier, that love that my grandmother had, that rebuke. And so I've gotten that along the way from people who I respect, from people who nurtured me, people who have just loved on me. And so they could give me the real and give me the truth in a way that I would say, yes, ma'am, you're right. Yes, ma'am. And I needed that. And I would say having that for me, and I know different people have had different experiences, but for me, that's been one of the most important aspects of being able to defy the odds. But again, I can't say I beat the odds on my own. I'm a part of. I have a circle of love that I'm a part of, that I belong to, and it's too many people to name, but they believe in me and root for me and hold me to a standard, and so do the young people who I can't let them down. So if I tell them what this educational experience and experiment is supposed to be, if I don't live that out, and they see me collapse or me fail or me falter or me become less than what I'm supposed to be, how does that give them something to look forward to? If the one person who said this is what education is supposed to be, if that's not what it is to me, and I believe in this thing, then I let them down. And so I also attribute my students also have been the driving force behind overcoming and conquering and persevering through times where I could have become part of the other side of that statistic. And again, I'm not saying that I've walked a perfect life. Actually, I'm glad that I haven't, because I want people to know that I've gone through some of the same struggles or encounters, experienced racism, experienced profiling, experienced frustration, working in institutions that didn't respect or appreciate my Blackness. I've gone through all of that, and I've crashed out, as the young folks call it sometimes, but I remember who I am at the core, and I've been able to come back to that. And so I won't say I beat the odds, but I'll say I'm a part of a village and a circle of love who has continued to lift me up during times or instances where I could have easily fallen through the cracks.
Let's talk a little bit about literary giants James Baldwin and Fred Hampton, which are so dear to you. James Baldwin once said that the purpose of education is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for themselves.
That's right.
How do you see Baldwin's philosophy showing up in the work you do day to day in Oshkosh, Wisconsin?
Yeah. Well, I ask young people who they want to be and who they're supposed to be in the world. And I ask that over and over again, because most times, the first time they're ever put in a position to think about that is when they're hearing it from me. If you were to consider why you were put on this earth, why are you here? And if you don't accomplish what you were put on this earth to accomplish, what are the consequences of that? And I ask people to think about that from that. Sometimes they say, I want to be an athlete and make $1 million and all that, things that are self-serving. But I ask them, do you really believe that you were put on the earth for that? Like, look at the world around you and think about, what does this world need and what can you contribute? What do you add to this world to make it a better place so that it's better than how you found it? And I just believe in being able to leave any environment we go into better than how we found it. But we first got to be able to see it for what it is. We got to be able to see it for the good, the bad, the ugly, what's possible, what has failed, what hasn't worked, what might work. We got to be able to see it for all of that. And we have to be able to see our place in that, our rightful presence in that. And so I would say when I show up here in the Oshkosh Area School District, I unapologetically name and articulate what this world and what this space is around me for the way I see it. And other people may not see it in that way. They may say, this is a utopia. This is this great place. And Oshkosh is a beautiful city. I chose to be here. But we are not by any stretch at the very best we can be. And we have to be able to acknowledge that and figure out what's my role, what's your role, what's your role. How do we get to become the very best that we can be? And so that's a question that I pose when I work with other leaders, whether that's on the city council or other educators or entrepreneurs who are thinking about ways to make this community better. I'm grateful to be respected as somebody they go to and just say, tell me am I seeing this the wrong way? And I say, no, I'm not saying you're not seeing anything in the wrong way. This is your perspective. This is your lens. I will offer you another perspective to think about, but we got to be able to see for ourselves the situations we're in. And that's what James Baldwin was getting at is a seed will be planted for you and to tell you how we see that happening right now in America. And I won't get into too many details where we could see something with our own eyes and another narrative will say, oh, that's not what you're seeing. No, you need to be able to see for yourself what's happening. Don't be deceived and told that what you are looking at with your own eyes or what you're hearing with your own ears is not what you're seeing or hearing. And so I call those things out. And for whatever reason, people seem to respond to it in a productive way. So as long as that continues to be the case, I'm going to continue to do that.
Baldwin wrote across genres, essays, novels, plays, always with this fierce, loving insistence on truth.
Yeah.
As an educator, how do you use that kind of intellectual courage as a model for your students and the teachers you train?
Yeah. So as an educator, both when I was in Milwaukee, when I was in Virginia and Oshkosh, I would show people James Baldwin clips because that man was so unapologetic in his writing, but also in his interviews and the way he would rebuke and get folks together, but also call folks to a higher standard. And he would sit there with his cigarette and just say, here's the problem with America. He would just start out, here's the problem with America. Or here's the problem with, I remember an interview he was doing and somebody was saying, what do you think white people think about Black folks? And he went on to say, I don't know what white folks think about Black people, but what I do know is Black people have been advocating for the same jobs, opportunity, freedom. So I don't know what they think about Black folks, but what I know Black folks have been fighting for has been this, this, and this. And we're still fighting for it. But the fact that he said it without a flinch, without apology, and he was right. And he did it in a way that I think brought people together. And I think that's why so many white scholars and intellects, gangsters, artists, folks in the theaters, when I study all the spaces James Baldwin moved through in Harlem at that time, and in other countries even, I often wonder, how did he get into these spaces? Who invited him? Did they really know what they were getting when they invited James Baldwin into these spaces? Because he's about to give them the truth and then go on about his business. And he was so eloquent and poetic, but also spoke with a sense of conviction. And I aspire to be that way too. When I am in certain rooms and spaces and I'm an unlikely guest in those spaces, I don't show up and conform to those spaces and tell people what they want to hear. That wasn't James Baldwin's style. I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. And I'm also not here to provoke you to resist what I'm saying, but I'm going to hold this mirror up or tell the truth in a way that it lands with hopefully open arms or on ears that then will turn into action. And so that's been something that I aspire to be like, and I demonstrate that first through my actions. But I show people these James Baldwin clips to say, this is who I'm getting this from. So if when I come across in such a way that, speaking truth to power and doing so with this boldness and with this courage. And I also expect and hope that folks, particularly young Black folks, will do the same thing. And James Baldwin just did that in spaces. And this is no knock to other leaders in the civil rights movement at that time, but they were talking to people who already agreed with them in many of these spaces that they were going to. James Baldwin went into places where folks had a very different opinion and a very different stance, and he went into those environments and said what I believe needed to be said and what he believed needed to be said, and I'm inspired by that.
I gotta say, he walked into the lion's den.
That's right,
and he was able to walk out.
It was able to walk
You
out.
know, I know some of those things that you mentioned. I do remember the documentary that they did on him. I'm Not Your Negro.
Negro, yes, yes.
When I watched it, that was more than profound. And I do remember that one clip. He was on the talk show,
Yes,
with the cigarette, and the audience that looks nothing like him.
Yes,
And he gave them what he needed to give them.
absolutely. Yes, sir. I took my nephews to go see that in Chicago. At that time, when it first aired, and I just young folks who I've mentored and brought up, I always introduced them to James Baldwin's work. And it came out, I think maybe on a Tuesday. And I said, Chicago's about an hour and a half drive from Milwaukee. So I said, we got to go down there. And the whole car ride back, there was 4 of my nephews, and they all talked about how they wanted to be like that. Like, man, I wish just one day I want to have that kind of courage to just say what needs to be said. And, you know, I was just like, if I got nothing else out of, I mean, the powerful film, and those who haven't seen it, I'm Not Your Negro, it's important to watch that, because I often have to say that to myself and to folks around me, like, because I am in so many white spaces, I have to remind folks, I'm not here to tap dance. I'm not here to put on I am not your Negro, right? And so, and sometimes folks are invited into certain spaces because it's like, we want entertainment, or we want a provocateur, we want somebody who's going to tap dance and perform for. I ain't here for that. I'm here to be a part of this liberation work. And so James Baldwin's that film, I'm Not Your Negro, resonates with me, particularly because of the type of spaces that I'm often in. But I want to make it clear when I'm in those spaces, here's who I'm not, and here's who I am.
So Fred Hampton was organizing rainbow coalitions at 20 years old,
Yes.
feeding children, building across racial and class lines, centering the community's survival. What does Fred Hampton's legacy teach you about what school leadership should actually look like?
Yeah, well, there's so much. I think, first of all, what Fred Hampton was doing in Chicago was profound, because many people didn't believe that the racism, the oppression existed in the North. So when people thought about oppression and injustice and the marginalization of Black folks, their minds automatically go to the South. And what I appreciate about Fred Hampton is he put a spotlight on what we all know is happening here in the Midwest and in the North, in places like, at that time, Chicago, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and other places. But he was willing and daring to take on and to be the founder of a chapter of the Black Panther Party and start an organization that gave kids an opportunity to first of all have the nutrition that you need to be able to engage in school at a time when nobody was doing that. So we think about, where did school lunch, free breakfast come from, particularly in urban communities or communities occupied mainly by Black folks. Fred Hampton had a vision and a dream for that before folks were writing grants. There wasn't a federal grant to come and provide that. There wasn't a free program to do that. That was community that came together and did that. And Fred Hampton believed in the power of community. And while he acknowledged institutional failure, he didn't stop at, let me critique the institutions. He believed that where an institution fails, and many times institutions are doing exactly what they're designed to do, that's where community is supposed to step up. That's where community is supposed to be the solution. And so where so many people are looking to the government or looking to institutions to come and solve the problem, at a very early age, before the world was able to chip away and beat down the belief and the hope in Fred Hampton. He said, no, we can solve this problem as a community. We don't need the government to solve it. We'll solve this problem. And I think there was so much power in that because he really believed the power is there with the people. And I believe that to this day. There's an organization here in the city of Oshkosh that I have the honor of working with. The organization is called SAPO, and you talked about that in the introduction, just the work that they're doing to engage community in problem solving. And certainly it doesn't mean that we aren't going to advocate for education systems and justice systems and political systems and governmental systems to serve all of its people. But that work is going to take our lifetime, the next generation's lifetime, the next generation's lifetime. So what can community do to be a solution or to intervene right now? Fred Hampton believed in that. I certainly believe in that as well. And I have a lot of critiques, probably too much to talk about in this show right now, around where I don't believe government is ever going to be effective in intervening. And that's where we need community to step in. And Fred Hampton modeled that. And unfortunately, he paid the price of his life for that. But I believe his life will be in vain if we don't carry on that vision to say people need to be part of the solutions here in our communities. We're not waiting for somebody to come fix it. We're not waiting for somebody to come solve it. We can solve our own issues. And I live out the principles of Kwanzaa in that way, where we talk about just who we are supposed to be to each other and in community. We can solve our own problems, be our own solutions.
So Hampton said, you fight racism with solidarity. In your work with Black immigrant and refugee students, communities that are sometimes positioned against each other, how do you build and sustain that solidarity across difference?
Wow, I don't know. I don't know because that's still a work in progress. But what I will say is when I talk to folks who here in Oshkosh, who we all, for the most part, we all want the same things. We might have different information about how we got here or why we're in this position. And I think that's where a lot of division comes into place, where folks get caught up or they fixate in how we got to this place. And I'm very aware of America's history. I'm very aware of the foundation on which this country was formed, where literacy was illegal for Black folks. And that wasn't just in the South. And so I'm very aware of the consequences of Brown versus Board of Education, where we lost thousands and thousands of Black educators, and our workforce has never recovered. So Black folks still represent one of the smallest demographics of educators and educational leaders in America's public school systems. And I have no disillusion that was a consequence of Brown versus the Board of Education. But what I have come to realize is people don't have that information, or they think or critical race theory or studies of the actual law and historical facts divide people. So for me, it's like, all right, we don't need to, if talking about the origin, how we got here makes it difficult for you to engage and be a part of the solution, what do we want for our community right now? It's just like people who say, well, why do we have to celebrate Juneteenth? And I'm just like, well, do you say that when we ask why do we celebrate the 4th of July? You don't ask that question. But if that gets in the way of you being able to acknowledge, appreciating and respecting and wanting freedom for everybody, fine. Let's not start with Juneteenth. We'll come back to that later. We'll come back to it, but let's not start there. So for me, being able to start from places where people can get on board, that's been how I've been able to work across differences, where meeting people from a starting point where they can engage. And so what I found is people here in Oshkosh, people in Milwaukee, people across, we want and we believe that everybody has the right to read. So if that's where we all, now people might have different opinions for why we see these disparities in reading. And Wisconsin has one of the widest gaps in achievement as it pertains to reading between Black and white students than anywhere else in the nation. And I believe that is a solvable problem. But I'm also not disillusioned to that. That is not because Black folks wake up and say, I don't want to read, I don't care about reading. When we have that type of outcome for so many years in a row, that is a outcome of a system or a set of systems. And whether or not I can get people to agree with that is not my fight anymore. My fight is, do you agree that everybody has the right to read, and that particularly Black folks and immigrant folks and students with refugee background are not reading at the same level as their white peers, and that is a problem? Do you agree that that's a problem? And most people will say yes. All right, great. Do you believe there's a solution to that? Most people will say yes. All right. Would you like to be a part of that solution? That's where it's like, then that's like, well, I don't know. And then people will weed themselves out. And I think that's why when I said, I don't know, I'm still figuring that out, how to work across difference, because the people who want to be a part of the solution, they'll opt in and say, yeah. And the folks who stop at that point and say, well, that part I don't know, but then I invite them to think about, so if we don't correct this and if we don't solve this issue, what does that mean for this community? What does that mean for the future of this community's workforce? What does that mean for the vitality and the viability of this community, for opportunity development, for opportunity access, for like, what does that mean? And are you okay with that? Because if you opt out, you're not part of the solution. Let me just be clear. And I'm clear about that, like James Baldwin would have. If you don't want to be part of the solution, there's no neutral ground in this. So then you are part of the problem that we're trying to solve. So position yourself in this issue where you may. So I'm still working on that though. And I will work with anybody across any racial, political, socioeconomic background, ability, whatever. I will work with anybody who wants to help make sure that all students, and especially Black and brown students, have the right to read, and they read at the levels at which would give them access to opportunity. And whoever wants to be a part of that work, let's work.
So both Baldwin and Hampton were met with institutional resistance, one by literary establishments, one by the United States government. How do you navigate institutional resistance to the kind of change you know is necessary in education?
Yeah. Well, let me start with how I used to navigate it and where I am now. So I used to navigate that resistance by fighting against it and calling it out. And that was my way of saying, like, all right, see, that's what I mean. Here's the racism. Here's the example of institutional racism. And by being able to spotlight and call that out, I had hoped at that point that more people would say, yeah, like this is racist. Like, this shouldn't be happening. But what I found was, it was like, I don't know if that's racist. That might just be one person, or that's a one-off, or so being able to talk about institutional racism. So we talk about Fred Hampton, James Baldwin's institutional oppression and racism that they encountered and navigated. Me calling out what I see and what I know is institutional racism was not helpful. What has been helpful, though, is to lay out facts, just lay out data. As a researcher, and part of my PhD, my dissertation work was looking at schools who schools who have these missions around justice and equity, and even strategies to close gaps in achievement, or they're receiving money from the government to close gaps in achievement. Are you really doing that? What does the data say? So let's lay out who has access to AP course, advanced placement courses, who has access to who's getting suspended at higher rates, who are you hiring, who are you firing, who are you, like, really getting into, like, what do the facts say? And so when I've been able to lay out and let the data tell the story instead of me calling it out, I found that to be much more compelling and inviting for people to say, yeah, all right, Houston, we have a problem here. But me telling the story and calling it institutional racism hasn't been productive. And I don't have to call it out. I'm at a point now where it's like, everything that I know, I don't have to say it out loud. But there are ways for me to provide the evidence of what I see as problematic and allow people to come to their own conclusions, or allow people to opt into the solution. So even if they don't come to a conclusion of how we got here or why this is, do you want to solve this or do you want to change this? And if so, let's get to work and let's change it. So both Fred Hampton and James Baldwin, they took on these, they critiqued the systems, and they were able to, from their platforms and their positions, speak truth to power and critique the systems. And they did it while not working within the systems. I work within an education system. I work in this structure. I chose to become a part of the structure to change it. And so I have a responsibility to critique it, but I also have a responsibility to help develop it. And just think about if you're raising a child. If you are always criticizing that child and telling that child what they're doing wrong or where they're failing or where they're messing up, that child is not receiving that information in a way that's going to make them become the best version of themselves. And I'm going back to my grandmother's rebuke, where she talked about what needed to be better and where the mark was missed. But she did it in a way that nurtured and inspired me to be better. And so I think when I become a part of the systems, my job is similar, where I do need to call out and rebuke, but I also need to protect, to nurture, to love what's working and what's right in these systems as well. So, and I'm walking this fine line of, as, a radical, people give radicals this label of, you want to burn everything down and tear it down. But people who have these radical ideas, these big ideas, Bell Hooks, for example, who wrote about education being the practice of freedom, people called her a radical at that time. And she wasn't trying to burn anything down. She was trying to create something. And I think people give radicals this label of like, burn it down, where they're really like, no, I want to plant something here. I want to create something. I want to build something. And so that's what I'm doing in this work is through my critique, but also through my nurturing is I'm not trying to destroy the system because I'm in it. And so are thousands of other students. So if this thing gets destroyed and we're all in here, it collapses on top of us. But let's build something better. And maybe we build something better and then we don't need this old system anymore because we built something better. And then we can destroy that once we have something better to move into. And so I'm at a point now where, you got to build before you destroy. And I want to build something that works for every taxpayer who supports this system, every community member who is impacted by our systems. And I'm not just narrowing that here in Oshkosh. I care about every educational structure in America. And whether that's public, private, charter, all of it has to work for our young people. And I want whatever option parents choose or whatever situation students find themselves in. The students don't choose to go to school. The compulsory attendance laws say you have to go to school. So wherever students have to be, like Bell Hooks envisioned, this should be a place where students are creative thinkers. They're able to activate and tap into the brilliance that exists in them and in the world around them. And this work as an educational experience or project is liberating for them. That's what I want for every single student in this nation, for every student in the school district where I serve. And I believe I have a responsibility and a role to play in that.
So if you could sit Baldwin and Hampton down with today's school board members and superintendents for one conversation,
wow,
what do you think each of them would say that those leaders most need to hear?
I think starting with Baldwin, he would light his cigarette, even though you're not supposed to smoke in public institutions now. And he would probably talk about the hidden messages about identity that students are getting. What are we as a board? What are we as a community telling our students about themselves and about their future when they show up to our schools? And not what we want, not what we think we're saying. What are the messages that students are getting when they show up to these schools? And then what are the indicators of that message? What does achievement look like? What do our attendance rates look like? What do our suspension rate? And we need to look at that as indicators. James Baldwin talked about, again, the society that his nephew was being brought up in, and is spelling out with brutal clarity and in as many ways as possible that he was worthless. So James Baldwin talked about, like, we're not just saying, like, what I think you can become one day. You have to really look at what the conditions and the environment are communicating, not just the words coming out of people, because then folks are living in this contradiction where it's like, well, you tell me you love me. It's like an abusive relationship. Like, you're saying this thing, but the conditions and the experience and the feelings is something different. So I think James Baldwin would say you have to narrow the gap between what you say you want for every student and the messages that students are getting for what they believe they're getting out of this place. Like, there's too much space between what we say we want for students and what they're actually getting. And I think James Baldwin would say, like, we got to close the gap. I think Fred Hampton would talk about, for school board members who represent the community, school board members are elected by the entire city, whether people have kids in the system or not, whether they've ever gone to the system or not. When folks show up to the ballot and they see a school board member up for election, they have the opportunity to choose who's going to serve and lead this system. And I think Fred Hampton, who was so community minded, will probably remind our board members of their responsibility to the community, and remind them of the role that, as elected leaders in our community, the role that they have to play to be the solution to some of our community's risks and challenges that we face. And so many school boards across our nation function in a way where they have one employee, and that's the superintendent. So the school board members, they supervise the superintendent. And that is what the laser focus often becomes. But I would broaden that and say, and I'm on the board for a parochial school in the city of Milwaukee, and I think about what my role is in community. So it's not just to supervise the leader of that institution. It's also being a part of the solution in community, because as Fred Hampton resolved, like, the solution is actually going to come from the people. And oftentimes the people are the ones who are voting and electing school board members to do something, where really it's like, no, you don't just vote for me and I come in and fix it. Like, we have to do this together. And so I think Fred Hampton will remind our board about the role community plays in improving the conditions we live in. So we can't stop at cast a ballot and vote for me, and then I'm going to go fix the issues by holding the superintendent accountable. It's, once I get in this position, I have a responsibility to engage, to invite, to exist in community with the constituents of this community, so that we can improve the conditions our students learn under, that our teachers teach within, that our leaders lead within. But we got to do that as a community.
Let's talk a little bit about the classroom and the community.
Mm-hmm.
You spent significant time as a literary teacher, specifically working with Black immigrant and refugee student populations.
Mm-hmm.
Describe what a powerful day in one of those classrooms looked like, and what did you see happen when a student connected with a text on their own terms?
Yeah. So, wow. So I got to draw from my experience with SAPO and the literacy classes that we host, and the acronym for that program is BLACK, and we're building literacy and academic confidence in our kids. And when students showed up, when they come to this class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually get there around 4 o'clock and they'll stay till 7. So this 3-hour window, and usually it's after they've had a long day in school, in the same schools. Sometimes the same people who I've heard educators say, these kids are bad, these kids won't learn, these kids can't read. I love the fact that I can say, there's nothing wrong with these kids. They're not bad. They want to read. They can read grade level text. And I experienced that with them. And I'm not saying everybody has that impression about our students, but I have personally firsthand heard that about certain students. And I said, oh, they're going to be a great candidate for this class I'm teaching. So I go find out who they are and invite them into this program. And when students come into that space, it's like magic. Brother King, we're supposed to end most of at 6:15ish. They refuse. Many times they're like, we can't stop reading. We can't stop here. Like, I got to see what happens next. And I'm like, come on, y'all. I got to get up early in the morning. Y'all got to get up early in the morning. But they get so deep into the text. And we use grade level text. One of the books we use is Dear Martin by Nick Stone. And this text examines so much of life and blackness and current events in ways that the students connect to or that they're energized by, and they come alive both in the discussions they have, and the application of the lessons from the text, because we ask each other, and they ask me and I ask them, so what are the lessons from this chapter?
Here's a reminder
from this chapter. And how do you apply this? What would this look like in application tomorrow?
Here's your reminder.
And so as young folks are connecting to the text, to the characters in it, to the space where they respect the space, they take care of the space, they want to be there, they promote the space, they say, I know we're at our capacity, but can I invite my friend to come tomorrow? Can I invite my friend? Like, they want to be there. And it's because they feel loved, they feel respected, they feel successful. What Bell Hooks wrote about and talked about, what education is supposed to be, this space of liberation and creativity and authenticity. SAPO as an organization, they've created that. And I'm honored that they've invited me to come in and be an instructor in that environment. Because the students deserve, and I believe they deserve the credit. Like, I can't say it's what I'm creating. They have that brilliance in them already. They have that intelligence in them already. And it's my honor to be able to be in a space to see that brilliance on display, and to help create the conditions where that brilliance can come to the surface for our students.
Culturally responsive pedagogy has become a buzzword in education circles.
Yeah.
But you've actually lived it.
Yep.
How do you distinguish between educators who use the language of culturally responsive teaching and those who have actually made it the architecture of their practice?
Yeah, shout out to Gloria Lanson Billings. She is the pioneer of culturally relevant teaching, culturally relevant pedagogy. She taught at the University of Wisconsin. I've had the opportunity to be a student of her teaching, to see her speak. And so I got to go straight to the source, Gloria Lanson Billings, who brought this idea of culturally relevant pedagogy to the scene in America's educational landscape. As she talked about living, like, culturally relevant pedagogy is not just a practice that you do in the classroom. It's how you think about students. It's what you understand about the strengths and the assets that they show up with, about the cultural nuances, that you have to put yourself in a position where you want to learn about that and get curious and ask students. Because I think the distinction is when many people have assumptions about culture and then try to teach from those places of assumption. Whereas Gloria Lanson Billings talked about learning, appreciating, respecting, valuing, and being curious about culture and identity, and experiences that students show up with, and figuring out how to make what the teaching and learning experience is relevant to that culture. And the only way that we do that is we engage the students in that process. So I, as an educator, as a Black man from Milwaukee, my idea about culture is limited to my lived experiences, unless I put myself in a situation, in positions where I immerse myself in other people's culture. Lisa Delpit writes about other people's children. Like, we got to get to figure out who's showing up to our classrooms, who's showing up to our schools, and what do they need in these environments. And if we ask students what they need, or they're showing or demonstrating to us what they need, it's our job to be responsive. So this is the part around, like, culturally responsive, culturally relevant. We then have to adjust our curriculum, our teaching style, No, we shouldn't have our desks set up in rows like tombstones in these classrooms when students show up. Like that ain't how kids want to learn. That's not how. So part of the culturally responsiveness, culturally relevant is what does the setup and the environment look like when students come in here and learn? Do we use music? Do we use poetry? Do we use call and response? Do we use art? Are students expected to contribute and demonstrate their own brilliance and knowledge, or am I the keeper of all the knowledge that I'm just imparting it into them? So Gloria Ladson Billings and her work around culturally responsive pedagogy talked about this isn't a practice that you do. This is this is who you become. You live this. I mean, and you talked about this earlier from a vocation perspective. So you have to live a sense of radical love for the people who you teach, the people who you serve, and that includes recognizing their culture, recognizing their identity. And I'll say this then so that I can criticize some of our administration in the government right now, where they say like our unity is our strength, not our diversity. And I believe this notion of unity being our strength suggests that we have to ignore culture, we ignore identity, and we all assimilate around one mission or one value or one vision for what America is supposed to be. And I rebuke that. I believe that our diversity is our strength. We all have a different purpose for being on this earth. As I talked about with our students, why are you on this earth? What do you contribute to the world around you? What makes you special? What, your language that you speak, the upbringing that you have, the holidays and the traditions that you celebrate, all of that belongs in this space. And this space should respect that. And you should be able to feel like you can walk in this space and you don't have to conform to this environment to become that. And we're stronger when we appreciate that diversity, when we give that diversity a platform to shape this environment. So this is not a melting pot where everybody's supposed to blend in and be the same. That's boring, that's bland, that's mayonnaise. I don't want that. I want this to be like a rich environment where there's some flavor, some texture, some seasoning, and that belongs in this space. So our diversity is very much our strength, and culturally relevant pedagogy rests on that premise that we are stronger and our classrooms are stronger and better when we appreciate and recognize the diversity that exists within it.
Wow. So, actually, I wanted to say that I think with that, I had a guest on that is doing some work with students. And he was talking about an innovative way in which he was working with students and he was doing it with art. Mm-hmm. And so as I listened to you explain this, and I know that there's so much innovation that I think teachers can use or instructors can use. But when I think about, just from that art perspective or that music perspective, I mean, do you think that enhances the students? Because I think it kind of like the way it sounds to me, and just looking from that abroad as to just looking at what that space may look like, it looks like it's a safe space that gives kids more than just the option to want to read or do schoolwork, but it allows them to be that much freer in the thinking. Is that the way that process is supposed to work?
100%. So let's think about art and music, for example. Young folks, but let me just talk specifically about Black young folks for a minute. We are creatives. We create, it's almost natural. And I'm not saying other folks ain't, but I'm talking about Black folks right now. And I remember when I was teaching, kids would like drum on the tables and stuff. And I would stop them like, hey, stop drum. As soon as I need a drummer, I'm gonna ask you to drum something. But for right now, I don't need you drumming. But they would like make beats and stuff on it, just out of nowhere, just break out and start making a beat. And eventually I said, you know what, I could use this. Because the kid asked me one day, he said, you said you was gonna let me know when you need a drummer. How come you haven't asked me yet? I said, you know what? You're right. And it was clear to me that he remembers information. He's musically inclined. He played the drums at his church. Like just music was his thing. And so he probably was that kind of kid that always had a beat going in his head. And so 100%, we need to be able to create space in our classrooms where for students who are musically inclined in that way, they need a beat for them to be able to, or a song to be able to remember, what 9 times 9 is, or, whatever it's going to be, or to remember the Bill of Rights. Go ahead, let's put it to a beat. Artists, students who, paint, draw, create, build. Again, just going back to Bell Hook's work around education is supposed to be this place where we create. So I 100% believe that when students can engage their creative minds in the learning process, especially when they're learning how to read or learning how to do math or learning these theoretical concepts, it sticks. It has that glue when they're able to create something along with it, to be able to either demonstrate their understanding or to be able to develop their understanding. So I believe arts integration is a part of culturally relevant pedagogy, and it 100% belongs in every classroom, not just in our elementary schools. And I see that mainly in our elementary schools and I've been in classrooms across our nation. I see a lot of that creativity on display in our elementary schools. Then I get to middle school and high school, and it's like everybody's looking on a Chromebook or a slide deck that's on the board, and they're just sitting there passively engaged. And that was never supposed to be. That's not the vision for education as liberation or education as a practice of freedom. To sit and look at the professor or the teacher demonstrate or show their knowledge or their packaging of the facts, and then we're supposed to just consume it. And Paulo Freire wrote about this in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Like, that is not what the design is. We're supposed to come in this environment and do something with this knowledge, create it, and then have some type of schema for how we apply this in the world around us. So I'm all about arts integration, music integration, poetry. I'm in a fraternity, so Kappa Alpha Psi, shout out to the noobs. If you could do a step with this, go ahead, like put a step with it. Whatever you need to do to build community in the classrooms, groups. If we need to create tribes within the classroom, and I think Black Greek fraternities and sororities help add to that, because it's like, yeah, we all have the same mission, but we do it from a tribal lens where it's like, this is our group, this is how we see it, this is our group, this is how we see it, but we all are going toward the same mission. We can 100% create that in classrooms. When I was a teacher, I had a step team in the youth fraternity, and the kids who folks said were the bad kids who needed to be kicked out, when they gave me the list, that became my youth fraternity. And they had no issues once they joined Strong. Shout out to Strong Hearts. Once they joined and became part of this community, they felt the sense of belonging. All of that, I believe, belongs in our classrooms, belongs in our schools, and it enriches and gets us closer to the mission of education being a practice for freedom.
So look, I want to make sure I'm mindful of your time. I want to do.
I got all night. Okay. I want to be mindful of your time. Yeah.
So I want to do now a rapid fire round.
All right.
Okay. And so, when I give you this question, I need the first thing that's going to come to your mind.
Okay. All right.
Are you ready?
Let's go.
The book that cracked you wide open, the one that changed the entire direction of your thinking.
The Bible.
James Baldwin's line that lives inside your chest, the one you keep coming back to.
The very moment I thought I was lost, my dungeon shook, my chains fell off.
One word to describe the state of Black education in America right now.
Fire.
The teacher who saw something in you before you saw it in yourself. Describe them in one sentence.
Miss Looker was a deep believer in my potential.
Classroom or boardroom? If you could only choose one for the rest of your career, which one do you choose and why?
Classroom every day. Where the teaching and learning happens is what I'm passionate about. It's what I was put on this earth to do. I'm a teacher by trade. And God has given me a gift to be able to connect with young folks. And as much as I love working with adults and working with policy and working with budgets, I come alive when I'm working with young people, classroom every day.
What is one thing about Wisconsin that the rest of America needs to know?
There are Black people here in Wisconsin. And outside of, and we all don't just live in Milwaukee either. Yeah, come on up. It's a great place. Come on to Wisconsin.
The moment in your career when you thought that this is exactly what I am supposed to be doing with my life, describe it in 2 sentences.
That would be when I got here to the Oshkosh Area School District, and I was tasked with reshaping our literacy program and being able to create a community-wide initiative and strategy along with a district-wide strategy within the system to improve literacy outcomes. That's what this is all about. Community being part of the solution and the school district internally doing its work to improve literacy outcomes for every single student.
If Fred Hampton were an educator in 26, what subject would he teach?
Ooh, it wouldn't even be it would be the subject of resistance and community engagement. I think that's what the class would be called, resistance and community engagement. Yeah.
Finish this sentence. Every child deserves a school that
sees them for the fullest potential that they have in them.
What is the last thing your grandmother taught you that you are still learning how to fully live?
Yeah. Without getting emotional, my grandmother told me when I show up in spaces, my grandmother called me Mister. That was her name for me. And she told me to show up and be a proud Black man every space I go into. And I do carry that pride, but there are times where I question if my Blackness led in that space that I showed up in. But that was something my grandmother wanted me, even my license plates say it loud. So the number S8 loud, say it loud. I'm Black and I'm proud. Like that was my grandmother was, be proud of your Blackness. And I am. I'm 100% proud of my Blackness. And my grandmother wanted me to be sure to carry that into every space I go into so that other folks would see me and see the Black excellence that exists around us. And I think sometimes I show up in spaces and people see me as an exception to Blackness. Oh, you're not one of those, and I want to make sure that I show up in these spaces where I'm just like, no, we all have brilliance in us. I'm not the exception. I'm not different from the rest. Like we collectively as Black folks, we need to be proud of who we are, proud of where we come from, and proud of where we're headed. So I'm still living that out. I'm still figuring out how to do that. And I probably will until the day I die.
Well, we definitely going to have you back. Before, and in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement you'd like to leave for our audience, as well as tell them how to connect with you via your social media, your website, any of those good things that you'd like for them to know?
Yeah, best way to connect with me and stay current on the work that I'm doing is through LinkedIn. It's at Sam Coleman, PhD. Then you'll be able to connect with the work that I'm doing, some of the research that I'm a part of, some of the articles that I'm publishing. So LinkedIn would be the best way. I think words of wisdom, just going back to what's at my core, is literacy and education, particularly, it is the lever for opportunity. And it is not limited to just pre-K-12. Literacy and reading, I believe, is a lifelong skill that we should be able to use to access opportunity, but also to have fun. Reading is supposed to be joyful. It's supposed to be a release, a place that we can go to see ourselves or to see another part of the world or access spaces that only might exist in books for us right now. And I would just encourage everybody to read more. That would be my advice.
Well, before I close, I'm going to need, do you have a couple of minutes that you can hang around after I close the show?
Yes, sir.
For those of you that have been with us throughout and watched the entire show, I appreciate you for being here, and thank you for being so supportive of the work in which we are accomplishing in all of our communities. So in closing, I want to say, for any of you that are watching on any of our channels, especially the YouTube channels, if you have not subscribed, I ask if you will please support us by subscribing to the channel, as well as enabling all notifications where you're able to catch the shows when they go live, as well as you're able to go back and watch all of the previous recorded content that we have created here for this show. So in closing with this wonderful monologue, tonight on America in Black and White, we sat in the presence of something rare, a person whose credentials are extraordinary, but whose character is the real curriculum. Dr. Samuel Coleman did not just answer questions tonight. He modeled something. He modeled what it looks like to be shaped by love, his grandmother's love. What it looks like to be sharpened by truth, James Baldwin's kind of truth. What it looks like to be animated by purpose, Fred Hampton's fearless people first purpose. He showed us that excellence in Black leadership is not accidental. It is built, it is chosen, it is returned to every single morning. We talked about classrooms and boardrooms, about PhD programs and community foundations, about a child in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, who picks up a book and discovers, maybe for the first time, that they exist in literature. That someone thought their story was worth telling. This is what Read More Oshkosh is doing. This is what Dr. Coleman is doing in the district office, in the university lecture hall, on stages at Harvard and National School Boards Association, and tonight, right here with us. He is insisting calmly, brilliantly, persistently, that every child counts, not as a metric, not as a test score, as a human being with a future that this country has a moral obligation to protect. So here I call to you tonight, America. Follow Read More Oshkosh, support the work. If you're an educator, take what you heard tonight back into your classroom tomorrow morning. If you are a parent, fight for your child's right, not just to pass a reading test, but to fall in love with language. If you are a policymaker, a board member, a philanthropist, get in the game. The children are not waiting for us to finish debating. They are in classrooms right now. This has been season 4, episode 111 of America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles Zachary King. Like, share, subscribe, and tell somebody. We'll see you next time, because this conversation, it is just getting started. We will see you guys tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, shall I say, on Changing Trends and Times, as we have episode 2 of our 4-part medical series of healthcare in underserved communities. You guys have a great night. Please come back and see us.